Welcome to In Real Life. This session is a session to help us think through the questions that come up for us just day to day, how we might think about them coherently, how we might chat about them with our non-Christian friends. Simon and Laura are going to do my favorite thing, as I've already mentioned, role play on stage. I have the ultimate power. I've been told that this really does have magical powers and that it freezes them when I do that and then unfreezes them. So I'm going to freeze them in and out so that we can kind of span out a little bit and evaluate what's happening, why it's happening, whether it could happen better or worse. And then I'm going to get you guys to break into groups as well and talk with friends who are sitting around you about some of what's coming up on stage and how you might deal with it. So let me just set the scene. These guys have just been in an English class together, and something about a Bible story has come up because it was related to a play that they're studying. And they've come into a break time, and this happens next. I've forgotten which of them is a Christian. We're about to find out.
Whoa. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Simon.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm really good, thanks. I love English, so yeah, I'm great. We just had a great class.
Oh, you're so weird. Anyway, I just wanted to, hey, do you ever get that feeling that you're being watched?
I don't know what you mean.
Anyway, hey, I just wanted to say randomly that you're a really nice person and quite a bright person, I think. But then it occurred to me, in English, you're a Christian. And because you're a Christian, that means that you believe the Bible. And when you believe the Bible, then you believe things like snakes can talk, and Noah's Ark, and people can walk on water. And when you think about it, really, that's just complete and utter, absolute nonsense.
Well.
We're not pretending this is true to life, by the way. The acting we might need to work on for another time. Harsh but fair. I'm going to get booed off the stage, but I have the power, so I don't even mind. I'd like you to break down into groups with just a few people who are sitting around you and just ask yourself the question, how might you feel if someone comes up to you and says something quite harsh or aggressive against your beliefs, like the Bible is plainly nonsense? And I want you to think about two things or discuss two things in your groups. How might you feel about what's been said, and how might your feelings impact how you then go into that conversation and what kind of tone and vibe you use? So just break down just a couple of minutes. How might you feel about that kind of aggression, and how might that impact your tone and your behavior? Okay, I wonder if you can begin to draw your conversations back to a close. Wondering if I can freeze you, but I don't think it has that kind of far-reaching power, this thing. I wonder what kinds of feelings or emotions that you came up with. One of the things that I've really noticed in my conversations with my friends is if I kind of clam up or get really intense or the adrenaline starts pumping, you can begin to be a bit just over the top about your reactions. It really doesn't help you communicate what you want to communicate. So maybe one of the things for us to be thinking about is, how can we just relax into these conversations? They're not a big deal. Even if someone's being aggressive, you can just be thinking internally, you know what? I can just relax about this. This isn't my responsibility. I can just calm down into this conversation and see what happens. Now, before we broke into our groups, Simon had just told Laura that she was a nice person and a clever person, but the Bible was utter nonsense. And let's just say that Laura responded in a way that was less helpful rather than more helpful. We're now going to take two. Laura is going to have a second go at responding in a way that might be a little bit more appropriate.
Oh, so hey, Laura.
Simon.
Hey, did you want to hear a joke?
Yes.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
I don't know.
To avoid being wrapped in wire and attached to a giant pink gun. Anyway, just in that English lesson, so in English, but seriously, in English, I was thinking how you're a really nice person and a bright person, But you also are a Christian and believe in the Bible, and so you believe weird things like talking snakes and people walking on water and Noah's Ark, and how can you believe such nonsense?
Well, it's nice to chat with you, Simon. I'm so glad we're friends. You know, just on your first point, I'm so glad that you've noticed that I'm nice and that I'm bright. You know, I think that was a great point. But we agree on that one. But in all seriousness, I know what you mean. Yeah. How can people who actually think believe in the Bible? That's what you're asking. And things like miracles. Well, you know, one of the things that I find really interesting is that, you know, I know that you're bright and I'm bright, but people who are a lot brighter than us, they exist. People like Francis Collins, who is, you know, former head of the Human Genome Project, or Professor of Mathematics at Oxford University, Professor John Lennox, or Professor Richard Swinburne, philosophy at Oxford. These people are incredibly intelligent, and many others like them all believe in the possibility of miracles, and they've written lots of books about it if you're interested. But the point is that the reason these guys believe in the possibility of miracles is because they believe in the existence of God.
Okay.
And the reason they believe in the existence of God is based on evidence. It's actually based on reason. You should really take a look at their books at some point if you're interested. But I guess the point is, if they're right, if God actually exists, then it would make total sense that God could and would intervene in this world. So in that sense, miracles wouldn't be irrational at all.
Okay, so you are a bright person, I know that. But still, even so, like people, you know, walking on water, don't you have to be just a teeny little bit gullible?
Okay, so back to that point that if God exists, then miracles are obviously possible, right? Now, the other thing that I find really fascinating is when I read the Bible, the way the miracles are written, they're not written like this kind of fantasy literature. It's not like you open the Bible and everyone's walking on water and we're just expected to believe that things are just popping in and out of existence. Yeah. It's written like a historical record. And just like you would expect, when something unexpected happens like a miracle, people respond in shock and fear and sometimes even in disbelief. But then there are enough people, there are like multiple witnesses who've all seen this miracle. And eventually people begin to think, actually, this is making sense. So it's fascinating to me when I actually read the accounts. They don't seem like, you know, they're just weird. It's pretty exciting. You should take a look.
Fareed, that was seamless. I hope you'll agree. I hope you noticed just this very basic point that Laura being not defensive about the situation and just relaxing into the conversation, having a good time with her friend, hugely helps the process of that conversation happening. But it's not just that she isn't defensive about the situation or, you know, is willing to just, you know, back away from any immediate confrontation. She's willing to push ahead a little bit and offer some new evidence and offer some new ideas that challenge what Simon believes. In effect, Laura is trying to help Simon to see that everyone is coming at this from a different point of view. Everyone has a worldview or a lens through which they see the world. And everyone needs to ask the question, are my beliefs rational? Is there evidence for what I'm believing? So it's not just that she's feeling friendly and fun and engaging. She's saying, let me challenge you a little bit. Let me ask you some questions. Let me give you some new information that might help you think through these things. Let us go through to the next question now. This time, Laura is an atheist. She's extremely upset about something, but Simon doesn't have a chance to think about it because they're at lunchtime. Laura walks straight up to Simon and she goes straight in with this.
My gosh, Simon, have you watched that new program on Netflix?
Which one?
That one about the Middle Ages.
No, I have not watched the one on Netflix about the Middle Ages, but did you see the Chelsea versus Arsenal match last Sunday? It was so...
You know what, I did, and it was a surprising result.
Yeah.
No, but don't get me sidetracked, Simon.
Okay.
This show was all about the Crusades. You're a Christian, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen you going to the Christian Union. How can you associate with a group like this when people who've perpetrated these kind of terrible acts, you're just like going along with this kind of group? Simon, tell me what you think about that.
Wow, okay. Firstly, I'm glad that we can speak openly, friends. It's good. It's good. And I can see that this really matters to you because I think, jokes aside, this is a really important thing. Yeah. Actually, during the time of the Crusades, admittedly, all sorts of bad things were done by lots of people, including, sadly, people claiming to be Christians. as you point out.
Yes.
But actually, I think it's rather interesting then when you look at Jesus himself, right? Christianity is meant to be all about Jesus. It is all about Jesus. You look at Jesus himself, Jesus never, ever tried to enforce himself on anyone by power, by use of the sword, by violence. Actually, Jesus' way was one of love and self-sacrifice. And if you look at his teachings, Jesus actually taught us not only to love our neighbor, like, our tribe or those around us in need, but even to love our enemies. So I want to suggest that just because bad things are done in the name of Christianity, that doesn't make them at all Christian. And actually, take the Crusades as an example. Have you ever heard of a guy called Francis of Assisi?
Yes.
Okay, well, he was anything but a sissy because he stood up with courage against the abuses that were being carried out in the name of Christianity. And I'd love to tell you a bit more about him.
Let's just say we've missed several cues. Anyway, I want you to break down into your groups and think about a different question. When Laura came up to Simon and she's really upset, and she goes straight in with this, Simon, have you watched this program? And have you watched this program? She's really upset and she's really confrontational straight away. He doesn't know straight away why she's feeling like that or what's happened. And that can be our experiences quite a lot. Sometimes you can have someone come up to you, they raise a question, you just don't know where it's coming from. And the tendency can be, as we've just demonstrated, to get straight into an answer, which in this case worked very well because we've rehearsed this in the past. But sometimes we get straight in with an answer, and you might miss the question that the person is actually asking you. Let me give you a really simple example. Someone might come and say to you, if there's a good God, why is there so much suffering? You might go straight into a kind of a head answer, the philosophy of why that is the case. And it might be that the person who's asking you that question is going through some real bereavement, some real emotional turmoil, and you've totally missed them. Another time, someone might come and ask you the exact same question, but actually this time you go into a real heartfelt pastoral answer, and actually they were studying for a philosophy paper. So the same question, worded in exactly the same way, can come from two totally different perspectives. So I'd like you to break into your groups and to think through when Lara comes straight up to Simon and is saying to him, Simon, religion causes violence, and I've seen this movie that shows me that religion causes violence. I want you to think through some of why might she be asking him a question about religion and violence? What might her motivations be? Where might she be at? I want you to think about her motivations, and I want you to think about what kinds of questions in a normal conversation with your friends you could ask to get to the heart of where someone is coming from. Let me give you a little example on that as well. If you ask open questions, not yes or no questions, but how do you feel about this question, or how do you feel about religion, or what kinds of things have you been watching? Big, open-hearted questions that allow your friends to talk, that will get you into the mind frame of where they're at. That's about as clear as mud. Let me try and sum that up. Basically, I'm asking you to think, why might someone ask you a question about religion and violence? What might their motivation be? What might their backdrop be? And what kinds of questions could you ask them to help you see where they're coming from? I'll give you just a few minutes. You can be drawing your conversations to a close again. We need to work on the long-range capabilities of this particular chicken gun. If I could have your attention, because I crave attention, so if I could just have it back this way. I can't even remember what Simon and Laura were saying before we had that particular interlude. Let's just go back and they can remind us.
Okay, Simon, I know I got pretty upset there, but I guess the reality is that I feel like how could I ever trust the church if the church has done things like this, like the Crusades? I really want to know what you think.
Absolutely. And Lara, I know we've had these chats before, and I know you've had some really bad experiences from people who claim to be Christians as well. And I guess what I want to suggest is just to be wary, not to judge something, anything, including Christianity, by its abuse, because I would hate for you to miss out on something that is actually really, really good, because some people, in the name of that good thing, have gone and done bad things. For example, I know that you love football, right?
Yeah.
And you're very good at football.
Yes.
Almost as good as I am. And when we're looking at football, if I was to say to you, actually, Lara, football is immoral and evil, because look at all the football hooliganism and violence that goes on associated with that. If we were to just get rid of football, we'd get rid of all that evil of hooliganism. Football is evil. You would rightly know, actually, football's not the problem there. The problem in football hooliganism and with the abuses that are carried out in the name of Christianity, it's people, not football and not Jesus. And I would hate for you to miss out on experiencing the love of Jesus because of some bad apples doing bad stuff in the name of Christianity.
Just two things that I want you to notice there. Firstly, there are all sorts of accusations that might come against you on things that you suddenly feel a bit panicked and backed into a corner about because you agree with the accusation and you think it's a really bad thing. Don't feel you need to defend the indefensible. You can just acknowledge what has happened and apologize for it where relevant and necessary. But at the same time, again, Simon doesn't just leave it there and just think, okay, well, I'll just, just smooth the waters. He then just presses forward a little bit and helps Lara to see that there's a real difference between the message and what some people might do in the name of that message. The real question is, what does the message itself say? What does Jesus say? Let's go back to the source and let's evaluate that together. Let's move on to another conversation. This time, Simon is a Muslim and Lara is a Christian. They've been friends for a long time, but they've never had a conversation about faith, so it's got a little bit awkward. Then Lara invites the entire year group to a lunch event that she's put on, and Simon thinks, well, this is fair game now. I get to ask about the weak point of Christianity.
Okay, Lara, I've got to ask, how can you really believe in the Trinity? I mean, this idea, God is one. No, God is three. God is one. God is three. It's just a logical contradiction. From where I sit, what I believe is that God is one, and that the Christian doctrine of the Trinity is actually a belief in three gods. From where I sit, that's polytheism. It's much simpler to believe in one God, as I do. And what does 3 in 1 even mean? It sounds like some sort of new shampoo.
Well, Simon, thanks so much for asking me. I really appreciate you as a friend. And I know that these questions mean a lot to both of us. I'm glad we're finally talking about this. And that does sound like a great shampoo, you're right. But the thing, do you know what? Something I think we agree on is that if something is illogical, then we shouldn't believe it.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I don't think the Trinity is one of those things.
Why?
Can I explain why? So if Christians were saying that God is both one being and three beings, or, one person and three persons, that would make no sense. That'd be completely contradictory. But that's not what Christians are saying. Christians believe in the Trinity, that God is one being, but three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And while there's a mystery in that, it's not logically contradictory.
Sorry, zoned out for a second, if I'm honest. Remember not to do that in front of 1,000 people next time. Let me just do some sum-up thoughts, shall I, on what they've just shared. Firstly, to say, many of the questions that you'll get from your friends are questions that you know in advance they're going to ask you. If you've ever spoken to a Muslim, you will know that they have questions about the Trinity. This is not rocket science. Every Muslim you've ever spoken to will have this question if you speak to them for more than 5 minutes. What this means is you needn't lie in kind of fear and trepidation about what are the questions that are going to come up. There are probably no more than 10, 15 questions that are going to come up every time across all of your friendship groups. It might be a fun idea for you to go back into your youth groups when you go away from this day to brainstorm together what those 10 or 15 top questions might be that are coming up in your environment, and then just spend a week or two on each one. Maybe nominate someone to do some reading or to some thinking and come back and present to the group. And why don't you just do a little bit of homework? There are balloon stations all around this room. You can go and chat to some of the team if you have specific questions you're struggling with and get yourself equipped to answer them. But the thing is, there are legitimate questions. There are real answers in the gospel. You might not have all of the answers, but there are people who do, and you can learn about this and think about this. Hopefully this day is helping you get equipped as well. Maybe I'll just leave us with this one thought as well, that these conversations, they're a privilege and they're fun. Sometimes we get a bit nervous, sometimes they can go a bit off course or they can feel a bit confrontational, but this is real friendship. This is what it is to love one another well, to engage with your friends. This should be something of an adventure in your life. You don't need to feel anxious about this. This could be a really positive part of you experiencing God and being a good friend to your friends. So enjoy these conversations. Learn to see them as a God opportunity. Who knows what God will do if you just take the plunge and reach out and have a conversation. Also, we saw those amazing statistics before this session began. 36% of people who become Christians say that a conversation was pivotal for them along the way, more than 1 in 3. Maybe you'll be that conversation for that person who then looks back and say, hey, I was one of those 1 in 3 who became a Christian because my friend took the time and had the courage to reach out. Thanks for putting up with the gun. See you next time.